This episode is brought to you by Dashlane. Try Dashlane Premium free for 30 days at dashlane.com/infographics and never forget another password and keep all your online accounts secure. Hello, infographics fans. It's another year and another update to what has quickly become one of the most heated relationships in the international community. In the last few years, North Korea has proven that it has the technological sophistication to develop a nuclear weapon. And while its missile technology barely gives it the ability to target the American West Coast, it is more than capable of raining nuclear fire down on its regional enemies, Japan and South Korea. In the last year, there has been reason to hope that a military conflict between the US and North Korea would be avoidable. Yet after two summits between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, we're no closer to a resolution on the nuclear crisis on the peninsula. Promises by North Korea that it would ramp down or stop its nuclear program after the first face-to-face meeting with President Trump were quickly proven false, as the American intelligence community confirmed that major activity was still taking place in North Korea's hidden nuclear labs. North Korea, wary of how easily the US removed several Middle Eastern dictators from power, sees having nuclear weapons as a necessity. And after years of promises by his father and his grandfather before him, acquiring nuclear weapons is also a matter of life and death for Kim Jong-un. Failure to achieve a nuclear capability by North Korea will certainly spell the end of the young dictator's life, as political rivals use the opportunity of failed promises to oust and likely kill him. So, with a threat of all-out conflict ever present on the peninsula, just how do the two nations' militaries compare? In case of war, strategy often matters more than weapons, and both sides have markedly different strategies for winning. North Korea has learned well the lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan, and rather than achieve the all-out victory over the United States it knows is impossible, instead the North has focused on making the conflict so costly in terms of collateral damage and civilian casualties that the US will sue for an early peace. Much like the Soviet Union during the Cold War, the North will try to force the US to the negotiation table by making the US's protectorate lose its will to fight. In the Cold War, the Soviets planned on overrunning NATO and seizing the whole of Germany and Belgium, then using the governments of those two nations to sue NATO for peace. In a new Korean War, the North will attempt to make the conflict so costly that South Korea will lose all its will to continue fighting and force the US to negotiate with the North. One of the linchpins of this strategy is South Korea's capital, Seoul. A city of almost 10 million people, the South's capital lies only 35 miles from the DMZ that separates the two nations. This places Seoul square in the sights of long-range North Korea artillery pieces. So much firepower that a conventional artillery strike against the city will cause untold devastation. While not all of the North's artillery could reach Seoul, enough to do serious damage to the city and kill tens of thousands of people are within range. North Korea's 122mm, 240mm, and 300mm multiple rocket launchers, as well as more traditional 170mm self-propelled guns, could all fire thousands of rounds into Seoul itself. And a single volley of the North's 300mm rocket launchers could deliver over 350 metric tons of explosives across the entire city. With over 11,000 artillery platforms ranging from rocket launchers to towed and self-propelled artillery, North Korea still retains a major advantage over the United States in artillery pieces, whom only fields about 2,700 total artillery, nearly evenly split between rocket launchers, towed artillery, and self-propelled artillery. Then, of course, there's the fact that most of the US's inventory isn't actually present on the peninsula. Upon the start of hostilities, though, the South's military would fall under American command per current operating procedures, giving the US access to over 6,000 pieces of South Korean artillery, most of which is towed and self-propelled artillery. The South, very cognizant of how vulnerable Seoul is to an overwhelming artillery barrage, has deployed its artillery in order to very quickly destroy North Korean artillery in counter barrages, leaving the North with the choice of exposing its most capable artillery pieces in an all-out attack on Seoul and risk having them destroyed, or using them instead to strike at military targets. Seoul, however, is a key objective for the North, and North Korean strategy does not extend much deeper into the South than the capital city. There's also the matter of logistics, with pre-war caches of supplies, ammunition, and fuel only capable of sustaining about a month of intense conflict, and only a few dozen miles into the South. Relying on an overwhelming all-out attack against the South in a bid to bring it to the negotiating table before the US can muster its overseas forces to respond, the North would utilize its entire air force in waves of suicide attacks against the South. In total, the North only fields just under 1,000 aircraft versus the US's 13,398. Of these, 458 are fighters versus the US's 2,362, and 498 are attack aircraft versus the US's 2,831. North Korea's air forces are overwhelmingly antiquated and feature Cold War-era relics such as the Sukhoi Su-7 and even the post-World War II era Ilyushin IL-28 medium bomber. It does feature a fleet of 35 MiG-29s, which while older are still capable aircraft, but they would be unable to face the onslaught of American and South Korean F-16s and F-15s, nor the South's modern anti-air defense network. Instead, North Korea would utilize these planes as kamikaze units against ROK and American military targets as well as civilian targets. On the ground, North Korea fields a force of just over 6,000 main battle tanks versus the US's 6,287 or the South's 2,654. North Korean tanks are overwhelmingly antiquated models, with a main force of 1,600 T-55s, dating back to the post-World War II years. It does sport an unknown number of Soviet-made T-72s and T-80s, but these are thought to be very few in number and would not have a significant effect on a ground campaign. While US tank forces would completely obliterate the North's antiquated tanks, again, most of the US's own tanks are stationed elsewhere around the world and would take time to get to the peninsula. The North would thus group its armor into large armored advances that would easily break through the American and South Korean defenses along the DMZ and roll towards Seoul at top speed, with the aim of cutting the city off on the ground. While South Korea would respond with overwhelmingly modern Abrams derivatives, the K-1 and K-1A1, these are greatly outnumbered by the North's tank forces. Neither the North nor the South field a navy of any considerable size, though the South does have the firepower advantage with its small fleet of 13 frigates and 12 destroyers. The North has long focused on trying to deny the US the use of its aircraft carriers by building fleets of midget submarines that are believed to be suicide attack vessels, meant to reach American carriers and sink them or at least drive them off the Korean coasts. With the hands-down best anti-submarine warfare capability in the world though, the United States would be very easily able to protect its carrier battle groups from even the North's Sango class of subs. A boat of only 34 meters long, the Sango subs are meant to ferry special operations forces for missions into the South and used as a last-ditch defense against American carrier battle groups. In the past, the US and South Korea would have responded to a northern attack via a fighting retreat action, falling back from prepared position to prepared position and drawing the North deeper into the South while buying time for the US's air power to arrive from Guam and Japan. Then the two allies would push deep into the North under the cover of the largest aerial bombing campaign since the original Korean War. While most of its equipment is antiquated and its troops' training and morale are both very poor, the North's sheer numbers would give it the initial advantage, at least until US air assets responding from Guam began to decimate the North's advances over the DMZ. Today, the initial strategy of fighting a retreat is still in place, but instead of pushing deep into the North to achieve conventional military victory, new plans known as O-Plan 5015 focuses on the use of targeted strikes and special forces to destroy the North's command and control networks and kill its leaders, including Kim Jong-un. A decapitating blow is thought to be enough to finish off the North's will to fight, especially when backed up by a significant portion of the US's strategic bomber force. Military and government cyber attacks are becoming more and more common, and we all know the real target of that is you. Your data and identity are what they're after, and you need to make sure you keep it all secure. For that reason, we here at the Infographics Show have been using Dashlane. You no longer need to subscribe to 5 different services to be safe and secure online. Dashlane is the one and only tool you need.